Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. We are going to talk about Afghanistan, the situation that is unfolding in Afghanistan. It has been a matter of great speculation, and we have seen the way Taliban keep on sweeping away various defenses of Afghan government. We know that they now control at least 6 border crossings into other places. That is not all. We have repeatedly seen statements coming from Afghan authorities. We have seen statements coming from the Taliban spokesman and Western and other regional forces as well. But what exactly is to become of all this? We are going to discuss it today, especially because yesterday the Prime Minister of Pakistan spoke to PBS, and there he once again reminded everybody that Pakistan cannot be held responsible for the actions of Afghan Taliban. We are going to talk about all that and more. First, you must see a report that our team has prepared for you. After that, we are going to play one statement of Prime Minister of Pakistan, and then we are going to continue discussion as well. Let us watch the report.
During an interview with Judy Woodruff on PBS NewsHour, the Prime Minister said a civil war in Afghanistan would be the worst case scenario from Pakistan's point of view, as Pakistan would have to face a refugee crisis which in turn would badly affect the country's economy. The Prime Minister has said that the US has really messed it up in Afghanistan. He added that the only solution to the country's situation was through a political settlement that was inclusive and involved all factions, including the Taliban. Prime Minister Imran Khan said, "We can only pray that the people of Afghanistan decide what government they want, and he hopes that the Afghans end up forming some sort of inclusive government." Following the visit by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, a 9-person Taliban delegation visited China. The Taliban, who have made rapid inroads in Afghanistan since the US and NATO forces started withdrawing from the war-torn country, have been jointly pushed by both Pakistan and China to completely break their ties with the terrorist groups, including the outlaw Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and all other outfits that pose a direct threat to the region. Pakistan and China have conveyed their concerns to the Taliban over their reported ties with anti-Pakistan and anti-China terrorist groups, and in case of non-cooperation, they could face consequences such as non-recognition of their rule. Pakistan is hoping that China could play a constructive and positive role in bringing about peace and stability in Afghanistan.
Right, you have seen the report. Let me now introduce the panel I have got in the studio. I have with me Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua Sahab, who is acting President of Islamabad Policy Research Institute, Islamabad. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Syed Muhammad Ali, Director, Strategic Affairs, Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, also joins us in the studio. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. With your permission, gentlemen, let us first listen into what the Prime Minister had to say, and then we are going to discuss.
This is absolute nonsense. Why don't they give us evidence of this? Firstly, let me just go back. When they say that Pakistan gives safe havens, sanctuaries to Taliban, where are these safe havens? When we say there are 3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan, who are, by the way, the same ethnic group as the Taliban, Pashtuns. Now, there are camps of 500,000 people. There are camps of 100,000 people. And Taliban are not some military outfit. They are normal civilians. And if there are some civilians in these camps, how is Pakistan supposed to hunt these people down? How can you call them sanctuary?
Right. Let me start with Brigadier Saab. Brigadier Saab, you have listened to what Prime Minister had to say, and you must be going through all the reports and analyses that are going on. First of all, we have been saying that usually anarchy doesn't have any pattern, but it seems that we can predict that things go south in Afghanistan. Everybody starts blaming Pakistan for it. Your take on how things are shaping up in Afghanistan, sir?
Right, thank you very much. Regardless of whether it is anarchy or it's a stability, I think the fallout on Pakistan is going to be there.
Okay.
So we
are
are
that lucky.
Yeah, we are conjoined twins, and the circumstances we need to be aware of. It's a tale of two realms. One is the realm of conspiracy, and second is the realm of win-win formulation.
All right.
The first one, we know, conspiracy theories, we personally do not subscribe to that, but they are being bandied about. Sometime back, we know Lawrence Wilkerson's, stance, who was Colin Powell's, COS. He laid out 3 objectives for United States and Afghanistan. One was to keep a watch over Pakistan. Second was to stoke unrest in the Uyghur region, Chinese.
Right.
And the third one was to deny Afghanistan as a bridge
Right.
of stability. Now, if that's the bigger picture, then is somebody trying to keep Afghanistan on the simmer?
Okay.
And
Okay.
by orchestrating,
By design.
by design,
Okay.
and not ensuring that there is a sustained peace and stability.
Yeah.
In that case, Pakistan still has its options,
Right.
and Pakistan has to play a very delicate balancing act.
Right.
And I believe that if the second option somehow materializes, it's a win-win formulation. The global powers also see the advantage of peace and stability, and if they have unanimity of views. I think then things are not that difficult.
Okay.
Things can be managed, and negotiated settlement that we all subscribe to, and the Prime Minister also alluded to, is quite possible.
Right.
And we
just,
can
just for the sake of record, the first bit that somebody by design wants Afghanistan to simmer, are you ruling that out?
I am not ruling that out because.
But you're teasing about it without actually giving us names. Who might that person be? Or
well,
country
anyone whose interests are served by denying the opponent's clear field.
be? Okay.
You see,
No, we are talking about India, right?
we can, but
Okay. Okay.
there are powers more, other powers as well, because it's Afghanistan is a complex mosaic, and global powers are also there.
Right. And we are going to talk about that. Allow me to actually bring in the second guest, and then I'm going to. We have all the time in the world to discuss all these things. Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, your take on what is happening in Afghanistan, and whether it is going to take us or the region towards some kind of win-win solution, or it is just going to add more fuel to the crises that we have seen over time.
I think Brigadier Jinjua gave a very interesting framework to start off the discussion. Let me add value to it by just introducing another perspective. Apparently, we tend to look at Afghanistan as a neighbor, as a volatile country in West Asia. But allow me to introduce another perspective, which is the international world order transformation.
Okay.
And I think perhaps it will be interesting to look at Afghanistan in that context. The earlier somewhat optimistic view a few months earlier was that the US is withdrawing its military from Afghanistan primarily because it wants to focus and converge its capabilities against China by accelerating the development of Quad. And it wants to pull out military and concentrate in the containment of China project.
Right.
But perhaps taking cue from what Brigadier Saab said, the instability of Afghanistan perhaps augments that interest of the status quo world powers.
Okay.
For two reasons. Number one, when you talk about the acceleration of Quad, it makes sense in terms of a conventional strategic rearmament and alliance building against China.
Right.
But the growing instability in Afghanistan also will delay and disrupt the development of CPEC or BRI.
Okay.
Which could be another indirect strategy of status quo powers.
I respect that we are wading deep into this territory, but I have to bring you back, and I have to bring you back to Afghanistan. while world powers might want Afghanistan to keep on simmering, or there might be need for some kind of civil war, the question is who's convincing Afghans to actually keep on killing themselves and keep on fighting?
I think that is the most important question, because no matter which world power or regional power tries to instigate or destabilize Afghanistan, the onus primarily is on all the Afghan factions and Afghan stakeholders, that even if they continue for their individual political survival to promote and push the agenda of some power, eventually at the end of the day Afghanistan remains unstable, poor, underdeveloped. And if the Afghan nation and its different stakeholders and factions eventually want to recover from instability and build a normal nation state where people can lead respectable, decent, normal lives, then the onus is on them to learn from their mistakes and history, and work with those countries which expect them to stabilize and develop their nation, rather than to work on behalf of the spoilers.
Right. Brigadier Sahab, the Ashraf Ghani government has been in power for quite some time. Big question is today their representatives are talking to Taliban in Doha. Why is it that they haven't been able to create a kind of an initiative that would ensure that Taliban also start taking them seriously? It doesn't seem that the Afghan Taliban are taking Afghan government seriously at all.
You see, the reason according to me is a completely different worldview that both subscribe to. Ashraf Ghani and his government, they are a house divided. You know, there's a group by Abdullah, Ahmad Saleh, and they don't see eye to eye, and they do not present a united front in front of Taliban. Taliban are very clear, contrarily, and they know that they're winning on a battlefield. In order to understand and answer your question, I think we need to understand the entire mosaic. There's a first power center, Ashraf Ghani government, which I have already said is a house divided. The second power center is the erstwhile Northern Alliance components, which I call the Afghan Northern Alliance political elite, comprising Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, Ata Noor's son. No, these are those guys.
And Abdullah also. Amatullah Saleh used to be also.
Even Dostam, Khalili, Muhakkik, and his focus is inwards. Khalili's focus is towards Iran, Hazarajat. You see, all these, this is the second power pole. And the scoins of people like Ata Noor and Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, so they are all graduates of Sandhurst, both of them. So they have their own interests and linkages with the West, and there are forces that are trying to support them. So vis-a-vis them is a force which comprises field commanders of Afghanistan, and there is a upper leadership. The field commanders couldn't care less what the world thinks of about whether they recognize, whether they get delisted or not. They are battle-hardened, and they get along with the battle rhythm. The higher leadership, Abatullah and Ghani Baradar, and those who are at Doha, they do wield a lot of clout, and they have a finger on the pulse of the field commanders also. And
sorry,
they don't.
Sorry to cut you here, but if you are saying that both sides are this divided, right? That would actually tell us that past 2 years of exercise of peace building or negotiation was an exercise in futility then? I mean, if you are talking to a group, but it is an isolated group, and there are others who are not going to listen to you in your name, then what is the point of talking?
What we need to understand is that it's a battle of stakes. Afghanistan.
Stakes or mistakes?
Stakes.
Okay.
Battle of stakes, because Afghanistan has been place where normal life has been completely supplanted by a war economy. There's a conflict economy, and there's a lot of pecuniary motives. You go to Dubai and you'll be amazed to know that the banks are full of amounts stashed, siphoned off, and some are amongst
by the Afghan
these
elite?
power centers, Afghan elite.
Yeah.
So the question about interim government, I mean, the first question is what kind of interim government? And Ashraf Ghani's perspective is that Taliban should come and join that. Taliban feel the numbers game, that Ashraf Ghani government or Northern Alliance, they should form a small component of that. So therein lies the fundamental conflict.
But recently, Ashraf Ghani government actually offered something very interesting, holding elections prematurely, early, right, in which Ashraf Ghani will not be participating. And yet, Afghan Taliban even rejected that initiative, at least according to the Afghan NSA, right? That has been happening as well. And it is quite intriguing. Allow me to actually go back to Ali Saab. You want to comment, sir? You want to comment on what was said earlier?
I think, let me contextualize this very rich and insightful analysis by Brigadier Saab. I think there are three trends afoot simultaneously. Let's deconstruct the reality of Afghanistan. One is the political dynamic, one is the socio-economic dynamic, and the third is the security dynamic, and they're all three interdependent. Very briefly, if you look at the political dynamic, I think what is very interesting is that the Afghan Taliban are reaching out to the international community, to major powers, to Moscow, to China, to Iran, to the US, to everybody practically. So that engagement itself represents a gradual process of legitimizing their international status, which makes Kabul administration quite insecure. But when it comes to the socio-economic dynamic, which is I think the most critical and often not looked at, when you look at the pro-Western Afghan elite leaving Kabul, what does that mean? It's not just the interpreters, it's also the elite businessmen which are insecure. And like Brigadier Saab earlier rightly pointed out, and you also mentioned in your introduction, strategically what Afghan Taliban have done is something very astute. They have taken over, they have taken control of the most important border crossings with not just the Central Asian countries but also with Iran as well. So what does that mean? Those businessmen who have a stake in trade with Central Asia and Iran, they are going to lose money. And the money is going to be diverted towards, the trading is going to be controlled by Afghan Taliban. So that will also tantamount to gradually economic strangulation of the Northern Alliance and also the Kabul administration. And that
that would happen if you are living in a two-dimensional world. There is a third dimension. Air power is still there.
Yes,
and that can always fly planes to
that brings me to the third, the security aspect. I think three things are very important. Number one, you see that not only at the tactical level, you see the advancement of Afghan Taliban in terms of capturing the ground, but you also see the recent two reports, one by the United Nations warning about the rise of Al-Qaeda and Daesh. That is also a matter of concern. And also the revival of US airstrikes against Afghan Taliban. That could be a huge spanner right now, because that is like adding fuel to the fire in the current milieu of Afghanistan, because that that practically tantamounts to throwing the Doha Accord out of the window. Because if the the peace between US and Afghan Taliban is no more there, then that means all bets are off.
Right. But it is all bets are off, not from one side only.
Yes.
I mean, it cuts both ways.
And also
the US can return.
And the most important question is what Mr. Blinken said in New Delhi. That is a huge signal that at the end of the day, whether the military gains on the ground by Afghan Taliban can be converted into national legitimacy and international diplomatic recognition as well. And in that context, the visit of Mullah Baradar to China is very important. Because if Moscow and Beijing can gradually bargain with Afghan Taliban that in return for a commitment that Afghan territory will not be used against China, against Pakistan, against the interests of Moscow, they can attract international legitimacy, diplomatic recognition, and some economic support. I think that will be an interesting scenario.
That's a great point, and that actually provides us a segue into something very interesting that has recently happened. We have seen statements, at least reports, Brigadier Saab, actually emanating from China, that China is very keen on communicating to the Afghan Taliban that they have to ensure that Turkestan movement doesn't find any roots there, or if it is there, they should be smoked out. Similarly, we have heard that Central Asian countries, the moment the border crossings were taken over, they all had a huddle, and they were worried that anti-Russia and anti-Central Asia brigades or organizations there will also find some kind of route. Pakistan also talks about TTP. And surprise, surprise, despite being blamed for everything happening in Afghanistan, the Afghan Taliban have not disavowed TTP. Why would that be?
All right, they'll never do so till the time they don't have complete sway.
Okay.
So
my worst enemy cannot be disavowed by the organization we are blamed to support.
Not as yet, while the situation is in flux. Probably there are two scenarios. One is that Taliban are waiting to have a complete sway, capture Kabul.
In Afghanistan or Afghanistan and Pakistan?
In Afghanistan.
Okay.
And after that, they need to, soon after they do so then they will, from a position of strength, maybe they would like to go for a kind of a negotiated settlement also. That might also be a strategy. That's the first scenario. Second scenario is that they are mindful of their international legitimacy concerns, and we also, mind you, don't know what happened to the Annex A. At least we are not privy their deal with Americans. What was in Annex A? Maybe there was something that you don't enter, Kabul. So if they stay short and they still offer a chance for a negotiated settlement, and that settlement takes place, that settlement will only take place if somebody leans upon, from United States, upon their protege Ashraf Ghani. The moment he gets the signal, he will be more amenable to a negotiated settlement with the Taliban.
Whatever that is, my concern is not about the US. My concern is not about Ashraf Ghani. A band of thugs killed 80,000 of my country fellows, right? And the organization, which at least is friendly towards us, cannot actually work up its courage to denounce them, detach them.
All right, I understood. That will only happen. That will only happen if you permit a kind of a stability. A stable, protagonist in Afghanistan will ensure that those pockets of instability or the refractory or truculent elements would be brought along.
There are two kinds of dynamics in power. One, when you are trying to gain power. The other one, when you have power. Remember Hamid, his language used to be very cordial towards Pakistan. Ashraf Ghani, Abdullah. Once they came to power, they changed their tune.
That's absolutely.
It might happen with Afghan Taliban. Why are we waiting that they actually come to power and then allow our worst enemies
that is
to breed there?
I mean, you can't blame them till the time they do not have a complete authority, and then give them a chance. I mean, we look at the mosaic. We are clear.
I have to look at Pakistani mosaic as well. Allow me to actually, Ali Saab also wants to come in, then I'm going to come back to you.
I think this is a very important and interesting question. I think I see a lot of truth when you piece together three trends. I hope it is not a coincidence that if you look at the number of attacks that TTP has carried out or taken responsibility of during the last 1.5 years, the trend is very interesting. If you look at the first 6 months of 2020, when Doha Accord was signed, there were only 48 attacks which the TTP took responsibility of. When you look at the second half of 2020, which is July to December, you see 101 attacks being owned up by TTP. And in only the first quarter of 2021, from January to March, they have taken responsibility of 61 attacks. So what does this indicate? There are 3 things which we need to understand and piece together. First, Doha Agreement means what? An agreement between Afghan Taliban and the US that they will not fight directly, and there is peace commitment extracted by the US from Afghan Taliban. But simultaneously you see an increasing attacks from TTP inside Pakistan. And third, we also see expansion, regrouping and intensification of their attacks, as well as enlargement of their numbers. According to open source information, their force strength has increased from 2,500 to 6,000. And all of their rank and file no longer constitutes only Pashtuns. So what I am saying is, there is a increasing and apparent trend that TTP is launching. And let me also bring in a 4th point, that the interview on a top US channel by the TTP spokesperson,
that was shameful.
No, but that means
talking about
it is not, if you add it up,
not spokesman, the head actually spoke to CNN.
Yes.
And that was a really atrocious interview, because he was actually virtue signaling to the US that we are not going to attack you. We are just here to fight Pakistan and create a small emirate there.
Exactly. And that concludes my final point, that what is the TTP saying? It is defining, it is identifying Pakistan military as its target and the building of some sort of their version of state.
I understand that. My concern is, for 20 years, especially since TTP actually emerged, I've been told that TTP has nothing to do with Afghan Taliban. The Afghan Taliban are the good people, at least they are fighting for the freedom of their country, and TTP is somehow a front or a shell for the Indian intelligence agency. I'm ready to buy that. But why is it that the good guys are not ready to actually disavow the bad ones? This was the concern.
Yes.
Allow me to actually play another clip of Prime Minister of Pakistan. Then we are going to come back to the studio. We have another sort of the Prime Minister. Let us listen in.
When there were 150,000 NATO troops in Afghanistan, that was the time to go for a political solution. But once they had reduced the troops to barely 10,000, and then when they gave an exit date, the Taliban thought they had won. And so therefore it was very difficult for now to get them to compromise. It's very difficult to force them into a political solution. But the Pakistani government decided to join the US's war on terror. This country was devastated by that. 70,000 Pakistanis died in that war, which we had nothing to do with. We had over $150 billion lost to the economy. What we do not want to be is part of any conflict. Now, if there's a conflict going on in Afghanistan and there are bases in Pakistan, we then become targets. We will then become part of a conflict which we were in the last 15 years, and we do not want. We want to be partners in peace, but not in conflict.
Right. Prime Minister was talking about the cost of fighting on the US side. And in the end, of course, CNN is not running the worst enemies propaganda or interviews. You wanted to actually...
Yes, I just wanted to comment, and thank you for running this brief clip by the Prime Minister. I think just taking it further, it's very important that what leverage Pakistan, US, Moscow and Beijing have over Afghan Taliban. it is very reasonable, and some press reports are actually saying that Pakistan is encouraging Afghan Taliban that the space that TTP enjoys in Afghanistan should be reduced. We expect cooperation in that from Afghan Taliban.
Right.
Similarly, Beijing expects tangible, substantive cooperation against ETIM by Afghan Taliban. And why, and what is the incentive for Afghan Taliban to do it? Is because they themselves are aware that in order for them to translate their military gains into diplomatic recognition and international legitimacy requires them to be sensitive to the interests of Pakistan,
Right.
to Russia, and also to China as well. And as our national security advisor is currently, and our intelligence leadership is in Washington,
Right.
we expect some consideration by Washington as well, because if they really
Yeah, but
expect some reasonable behavior and some pressure on Kabul administration, that
Yeah,
without
but my
them
concern is-
showing flexibility,
I
peace
respect-
cannot be achieved.
Ali Sahab, I respect what you're saying, but my question is very simple. It is about Afghan Taliban. It is not about Moscow. It is not about Beijing. It is not about Washington, D.C. It is about the people who are there and within their control. It is to actually get rid of a bad group. Right, Brigadier Sahab? The concern that I'm failing to understand, what is the downside for the Afghan Taliban in denouncing TTP and getting rid of it? Later on, it can become a problem that they might have to actually use the same logic for Daesh that is going to destroy the entire region.
You see, there are issues with Daesh, there are issues with the AQIS, ETIM, IMU, and you have to understand the entire mosaic. Without understanding, you just can't formulate.
Yeah.
You see, IMU is at the moment the most diminished entity. AQIS is also, it's not so strong now. Daesh, ISIS, is a entity which needs to be viewed with little concern. Why they are not denouncing TTP? Why they are not denouncing? And at the moment they are not, as per you, controlling. Maybe things are not within their complete control. Because Afghanistan, there are areas which are under the Afghan government. There are areas which are under AQIS. There are areas which are under Afghan Taliban.
Right,
And
but words are within their control. They can just issue an edict denouncing them, can't they? They can, right?
They can. But
My humble submission is, while we are talking about the whole mosaic, and I understand that you are talking about IMU, you are talking about Turkestan, East Turkestan movement, others, the concern is that a country that is so close to Afghanistan, I'm talking about Pakistan, we have a history with them, right? And then we have a past history with Afghan Taliban. We were one of 3 countries that ever recognized their government in Kabul. And if we have any kind of sway, shouldn't we be asking them first to actually denounce my worst enemy? I'm not asking for big thing. I'm not asking them to denounce India. I'm not asking them to denounce America. I mean, on one side, we are saying that America might be actually doing bad things. But it is the only country apart from Pakistan that might have killed any of the TTP leadership. Afghan Taliban never did. And my concern is today, why is it the people that I was told for 20 years are not bad people, they are not actually getting rid of someone who is on record enemy of civilization, killed 80,000 people in Pakistan.
I think in some ways they have done so. In response to Pakistani government's concerns about cross-border attacks, they have issued their formulations that we will not allow any entity to launch cross-border attacks upon Pakistan. This is on record by TTA. This gives us the hope that once they have the complete control, then is the time when they have the legitimacy. At the moment, they don't have even legitimacy. That is the time to hold them to account and to ask them to clearly denounce and control their territory, and for which I think they are ready also.
Is there a
Because
possibility that tomorrow, if they come to power, they don't actually take care of that matter at all?
There is a possibility, and for that possibility,
Is it a cost worth risking?
you see, we cannot micromanage things in Afghanistan. That we should be very clear. Afghanistan should be left to Afghans to decide what to do, and if they decide to fight and not to negotiate, then we have a we can nudge them up to a certain stage, and beyond that we need to have our own protective measures. We should take care of our own areas. We should take care of our own ungoverned spaces, our own crossing places.
Right. There is a reason why I'm this sentimental. I don't know. It must have. I hope it is not, but it might have happened to you as well. I lost my childhood friends, some relatives to terrorism. I mean, terrorists kept on attacking. TTP did. They proudly took responsibility of their murder. So I'm not ready to, forgive that kind of enemies of civilization, and somehow they're hiding in plain sight and actually drawing legitimacy from Taliban's narratives. That becomes a problem for me. Ali Sahab?
I completely agree with you for three reasons. Number one, I think in order to counter TTP, there are four things. Now, briefly, I'll try to deconstruct the strategy. One is their ideology. The second is, the funding. The third is the kinetic support, the material support, and the fourth is the recruitment and the rank and file. And I agree with Brigadier Saab that we need to, put our own house in order. We need to ensure border security and internal security, but we need to go beyond that. It's hybrid warfare, so we need to fight and contest it in all domains. We need to ensure that no funding is coming from anywhere else, and perhaps the visit of the Saudi foreign minister could also be relevant in that context. Although we have a special relationship with them, we don't discuss these things openly. And also,
but I get what you're saying. Pakistani government even prepared a dossier which carried all the evidence of India's meddling through Afghanistan into Pakistan, and we have highlighted that they have been supporting TTP, they have been supporting Baloch, sub-nationalists and all miscreants actually. Here's the point, regardless of what else happens, if you are someone who claims to be a friend of Pakistan and you control a space, how can you allow enemies to exist here?
That's what I completely agree, and I'm saying we are already doing it. Let me explain this quickly.
How?
The crisis diplomacy that you see with China, with Saudi Arabia, with Iran, with Moscow is part of that. And what we are doing, we are not just trying to tell Afghan Taliban that we expect this respect of our national security interests by them, not just unilaterally, but I think there is an understanding between Islamabad and Beijing as well, that they also received a similar demand from Beijing, a demand from the foreign minister of China, that they also expect not just denial of space, but tangible steps and measures against ETIM and TTP. So I think there is a degree of diplomatic cooperation and convergence in our approach between Beijing and Islamabad. And let me also bring in Moscow as well, because you are aware that military exercises are being held on the northern side of their border, and the defense minister of Russia has issued a statement in which they have warned that Daesh are being brought in not just from Syria but also Libya into this territory. So I see a convergence of diplomatic effort in trying to mutually use their leverage over Afghan Taliban, that even if they achieve military victory, they will not be able to translate it into regional and international legitimacy and diplomatic recognition unless they respect the interests of these countries.
I get that. I understand that China is a power, right? A great power. Russia also, America also, other countries. I understand that they will find a way to take care of their interest. In the end, my concern is about my country's interest. And somehow, as it has happened in the past, they find a way to take care of their problems. But in the end, when I am supposed to take care of mine, the enemies still exist. And they continue to use Afghan soil or other soils against Pakistan. Is there any assurance that this will not happen in coming days?
Well, at the diplomatic level, they have issued a statement, Afghan Taliban, that they will not allow the Afghan territory to be used against any other country. They have said this.
No, but that is a statement. Have they said that TTP is not one of them and they are enemies?
I don't think they have named any outfits, but I agree
And
with
they've-
Brigadier Saab
they've
that
not
once
owned
they
them
achieve
also.
that capability,
They've not owned them also.
Yes.
You see, you
Yes.
must not confuse
Head
two
of
things.
TTP is always appointed by the head of Taliban, Afghan Taliban.
Not necessarily.
They-
No,
not
no, no.
necessarily.
Mullah Umar actually nominated
no, I
I think
previous
there
one.
is
so.
ideological similarity, but they are not, you know,
There's an
subsidiary
ideological
organization.
kinship, but they
Yeah.
no longer pay obeisance to
Yes.
TTA. You know, we need to understand two clear things. One is the thing that you are alluding to, our ungoverned spaces, our own problems with extremism, our own national action plan. Who stops us from implementation of 25 steps of those NAP? Afghan
20
Taliban?
points of national action plan.
It's our own. So we need to enhance our own resilience ourselves and be strong enough to take care of the fallout.
Right.
Then what's to be done? You see, regional consensus till kingdom come, we keep talking ad nauseum, but we do not say what to do with that. I
Right.
think it's about time that Pakistan takes the lead in this regional consensus, and there should be a
About time, 20 years late, I
there's a
guess.
declaration. There should be a declaration
Right.
by
I'm-
regional
I'm-
countries.
Right.
Okay, and what's so difficult that we will not
We have to
allow
wind up
terrorism,
the program.
no Emirates, and there will be no attacks.
That's a good
So-
point. And I think I will actually, I like the point that you raised about national action plan. I think that is the least we can do at this moment to fulfill it, implement it. I'm just told that we have run out of time. We'll do another program hopefully in coming days with better predictions, let's hope. Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua Sahab, thank you very much sir, for being part of the program. Sayyid Muhammad Ali Sahab, thank you very much. It is always
Pleasure.
great having you in the show. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. We have already overshot our allotted time, so I'm not going to bore you with a longish conclusion. But let us, for a minute, remember that we are living in a country, we are sitting in its capital, and first of all, its interests are what we have to guard. And at this moment, I think if Afghan Taliban don't actually denounce TTP, that is, in my mind at least, creating a lot of doubts about their intention. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.